Welcome back, legal enthusiasts. I, Animesh Upadhyay, along with my colleague Abhipriya Burman, is back with another episode of Off the Desk by the Law Culture. In this episode, we'll be discussing practical-based approach versus the lecture system vis-a-vis legal education in India. To throw the light on the issue in hand, we have with us founder of Legal Sapiens Law Institute, Mr. Dev Jyoti Das, sir. Legal Sapiens Law Institute is a prominent Indian law institute offering high quality education services to students. Legal Sapiens offers 360-degree level education assistance to students. The institute focuses and keeps students abreast of the latest courses in their sectors. It's an honor to have you with us, sir. And we, on behalf of the Law Culture team, thank you for sparing time from your extremely busy schedule.
It's Teachers' Day, so it was, if nothing else, today definitely was a relatively free day as well.
Yes,
So the honor is all mine to be hosted by smart young people like you.
yes, sir. Thanks, sir.
Yes,
So,
sir.
sir, without any further ado, uh,
Yeah.
my first question will be that the proponents of training students in the theory of law are not actually advocating the teaching of theory, but are urging the legal education focus on training students in a method of analysis. How do you weigh the two approaches? Are they equally important, or one is more important than the other?
So personally, I would think that the theoretical aspect or the philosophical background to a particular law is maybe not as important as a practical application, but it's the moment you one day want to uh, argue, even not even create, but even if you want to argue a new precedent structure, or you want to come up with a new idea as to how a particular law should be interpreted, it comes in really, it becomes really useful that you have the philosophical background behind a particular law. It is for the same reason that, for instance, when people ask me, sir, should we opt for BA LLB or BBA LLB or a BCom LLB? And would it not be more beneficial if I want to become a corporate lawyer that I am, having a BCom LLB combination rather than a BA LLB combination? Now, I would always suggest, with all due respect to all kinds of combinations, it just makes you a more holistic law student if you have an understanding of political science and sociology and constitutional philosophy and jurisprudence, even when you are interpreting the aspects of corporate law. So whether it is Section 25 of the previous Companies Act, which is now Section 8 of the new sorry of the new legislation. What is a not-for-profit company? How do you interpret the tax structure, and so on and so forth? All of these things philosophically just becomes a little more useful.
Right, sir.
It's a, but there's a, we can see that while professors at law colleges approaching teaching the law subjects, there's two kind of things. One in which the first 2 years of my law school, I was very curious about these things that how moot court exercises and internship, these two things form a very critical, very important part of our legal learning process. So how do you think that a person should approach internships, especially? We'll come to the moot court point. Internships, especially to like get the maximum benefits out of it.
Um, so, so of course, I've gone through the process of 5 years of suffering in
Yeah.
silence and doing my internships myself. But
Right.
to be honest, it's been a very fun process as well. So, for instance, in my first year, I did my internship at Human Rights Law Network, and I published an article with Combat Law Journal, and so on.
Mhm.
And I made a lot of good friends. One of whom was a. I mean, there was a lot of good friends that I made at those internship places as well. And towards the end of my law school, I did my internships at the topmost law firms. Like, my last internship was the firm that I got a PPO from, which is Amarchand Mangaldas. Now, how I would suggest that people go about their internships is, a lot of people go with a certain mindset to law school itself, that, I want to do litigation, or I want to do corporate law, or I just want to become a judge or civil services. Now, I think the beauty and the burden of law school is it comes as a package. So I first of all would strongly suggest that nobody goes with that completely pigeonholed life for themselves. So even if you want to become a litigation lawyer, why not go check out whether Amarchand is a nice place or not? If you don't like it, nobody's putting you in a
Right.
bonded labor situation. You can still go litigate, right? And if you're so sure that you want to become a corporate lawyer, you might as well still go to the Supreme Court. And I interned with Ghulam Vanvati, who was the then Solicitor General of India, who later on went on to become the Attorney General of India. So even if I did not opt for litigation towards the end of my law school, I mean, there is no way I would say that I have absolutely any regrets of spending my time in the Supreme Court or doing my clerkship with Justice Dilip Bhosle, who was then a judge of the Bombay High Court and then subsequently, of course,
Right.
became Chief Justice of the Allahabad High Court when I was in Lucknow, coincidentally. So it's, I mean, so it's been a lot of exploration that I think you should go through. Now, of course, towards the end of your law school, like say the fourth or fifth year, I think you should be able to make up your mind a little more. And towards that time, you should definitely do a little more focused internships. Having said that, a lot of these things are much easier said than done. Like you don't really get the opportunity or become as lucky as I was randomly to start working with the Solicitor General or get an internship at Amarchand, which means there are some basic things that you also have to keep in mind. And I say it whenever this question sort of comes up, no matter who tells you what, unless they're honestly telling you that your ranking in your own batch matters, and even if you're not getting official ranks and so on, that's all. Frankly, everybody knows that there is a rank. If tomorrow, like a top law firm comes to your college and says, we want to interview the top 10 students, the college placement committee is not going to say, we don't know who the top 10 bloody are, right? So everybody knows that there is a rank, one, and anybody who's telling you the ranks are not important is one of two things. A, is simply so ignorant that doesn't know how the world works, or B, is simply lying to you because they don't expect much of you. But you should definitely expect the most out of yourself, and therefore study hard, get your internships, and then towards the end do more focused internships. I think they're very, very, very important part of clinical legal education.
Very
Yeah,
well
sir.
said,
Of
sir.
course, even I think in my early few years, there were a lot of students who were they're like grades don't really matter. You should perform
No,
well
no,
in
they
your
do.
internship. Yeah, exactly. I'm
No,
now in fourth year. I have learned that grades do matter. The
yes.
recruitment people who come to it, they look at it. So yeah,
Of
that's
course.
very
So
true.
it's not that people expect you to have a greater capacity of mugging up, because even law firm partners know that a lot of it involves mugging up. What they're trying to evaluate from your grades is not your ability to cram up scrap, but more importantly, it's a reflection of your sincerity. So no
Right.
matter what the system is, if you're still willing to put down your hard work and put down your hours and hours of mugging up, that reflects a certain degree of uh, professional commitment that you have towards your own grades. And therefore, it is the same commitment that will bring to their boardrooms and conference tables and conference calls. So that's pretty much what they're looking for in a young associate. I mean, you can keep on saying, they're looking for geniuses and so on. No, they're geniuses
Right.
themselves. They know how to solicit clients. They're not looking for you to get and coordinate with Mukesh Ambani. Their partners can do that. So what they need is hardworking
Right.
people who understand how the law works and understand deadlines and are basically grown-up people, not kids with utopian
Yeah.
ideas of how the world should be.
Very well said, sir. So the
Yeah.
installment of clinical legal education is believed to be a great step towards strengthening perceptions, attitude, skills, and sense of responsibility. To organize
Yes.
this idea of a practical scheme of teaching, it requires a great deal of initiative, experimentation, and adoption.
Hmm.
How do you think this structure
Right.
should look like, and how can it be executed?
So, well, I mean, to be honest, a lot of change has to come from the faculty side of the NLU structures or the any academic institutional structure. For example, I think to be honest, there's a slight mismatch between the quality of students that we have in top, not just top law schools, but I mean all top colleges, whether across all educational spectrums, whether it is IITs or IIMs or even business schools. So we have a slight mismatch, slight pretty decent mismatch to be honest, where the students are actually of the topmost caliber. And with all due respect to a lot of teachers who I think are absolutely spectacular in terms of their academic proficiency and command and fluency over the English language, A lot of them are simply not a match for the students that they are trying to teach. So while we will have Harvard Law School, where Dean of the Harvard Law School came up with the Socratic method, and there were protests at Harvard Law School that the Socratic method. So for those of you who don't know, Socratic method is a method of teaching where you basically start by asking a question, and the teacher is not really involved in giving you a lecture on what, say, something like basic structure or Article 21 is. But it is anyway expected that the student already knows what Article 21 is. We will still try to simply explore the various nuances and further analyze the depth and variety of what Article 12 and the ocean within is letting us explore. So it's not, nobody has to actually tell you that 21 is right to life and personal liberty except in accordance with procedure established by law and so on and so forth. That's something that anybody can read, and especially people who've cleared a national level entrance and so on. So I think, it's a slightly off the track kind of an answer that I gave you. I know I'm not directly giving you an answer on clinical legal education, but what I'm trying to say is the question includes a more foundational issue. And the more foundational issue is, even if a student or a bunch of students or a majority of students in the top law schools, like you and Imesh, for example, are willing to go through the process of clinical legal education, are willing to explore more practical aspects of the dynamic profession of law, I don't know how many faculty members would be in a position to offer you that dynamism. And I think that until that gap is bridged to a substantial extent, we can hypothetically keep on discussing how clinical legal education is superior. But that's like saying, as much as if Tendulkar was my coach, maybe I'd have played cricket far better. But since Tendulkar is not my coach, it's a more redundant discussion, and you can keep on discussing what if Tendulkar was my coach, but he's not, and that's that right there is a problem, in my opinion.
Right.
So, sir, on the point of the type of teaching in the class, I had this thing where animation you were talking the other day, that we are taught
Yes.
about morals and justice and how
Yes.
we behave and how we approach socially the subject of
Yes.
law. Now, since like recent years, the scrutiny on how lawyers are behaving, how what they're claiming and what they're doing has increased. Now, keeping that in mind, so the social implications of how lawyers argue a case in the court, do you think that it can be taught practically, like through our internships and all, or is it quite reserved for the classroom as conventionally believed? If I were
So,
to, okay, yeah.
yeah, no, please continue. I'm going to
No,
respond once you're done.
so just an example, like in our legal methods class, we were taught about how we should approach as a lawyer, that in certain cases, we have to still maintain our integrity, our morals while arguing, while putting up the best defense for our clients, right? But in practicality, in my personal internships, I've seen places where advocates blatantly lie within a court. I have seen this personally happen, and it kind of normalizes the situation. For me, it becomes like, okay, this is something which is very normal. I can do this. I can go above or below my morals and avoid it. So yeah, so that's what I'm kind of trying to ask.
So, first of all, let me start by saying, if you really follow the Professor H.L.A. Hart and Lon Fuller debate on law and morality, or if you try to juxtapose the idea of morality and superimpose it on, say, the Nuremberg trial, of course, at the end of the day, you will discover that that morality has probably more value than the law itself. Having said that, and trying really hard not to convert it into a law and morality lecture, let me just say, at the end of the day, the problem with a virtuous word like morality, or a positive word like morality, is the danger of whose morality is more important than whose. Right. So it can be something as simple as whether Padmavat should be released or not. And I'll come back to the larger issue that you asked me about. But just to depict how a discrepancy in whose morality becomes a far bigger problem than morality itself. Right. So morality is a positive word, but if my morality is different from yours, that can lead to enough conflicts within itself. right? So I think what everybody should keep in mind, whether it is in advocacy or in general life, for instance, is the simpler idea of whether you're conforming to your own moral standards of integrity. Do you have a clean conscience? Can you look at your mirror and say, I'm a good and decent person or not? And I mean, deep down, you know what you've done. And if
Yeah.
you're not able to have a kind of honest conversation with your mirror, I think that's where the first problem should begin. But that's again purely philosophical. Secondly, when you're talking about the legal profession per se, right, and specifically now I'm contextualizing in the context of lawyers alone. I'm not talking about businessmen and corporate investment bankers or bureaucrats and politicians anymore. Advocates specifically have to conform to a code of ethics. Now, one of the code of ethics or the philosophy behind the Advocates Act also is something that Abhipriya, you mentioned that you've seen advocates lie. Now, theoretically, that's not possible.
Yeah.
Advocates cannot theoretically lie because the advocate is simply speaking on behalf of the client. So it is the client who lies. It is a witness who can lie, but it is not possible for me because I'm simply representing you to be able to lie in court. So because I'm speaking on behalf of the client. So if I'm representing myself, I might lie. You're getting it's not an ethical barrier. So now there are rules, of course, which specifically say that if you knowingly misrepresent to the court, because at the end of the day, you're not only representing your client, you're an officer of the court as well. If you have a bar council license and you have a right to represent other people, you're an officer of the court. So you have a duty towards the court not to misrepresent information, knowingly, right? But if you have a reasonable doubt, and if you are also not sure, and it's very easy to convince yourself that you have a reasonable doubt in terms of believing your own client, right? Whether it is something like the undefendable case of Manu Sharma in the Jessica Lal case, and if you hear Ram Jethmalani speak over and over again, including, I think the most vicious of those conversations was with Karan Thapar, or you listen to a lot of these senior advocates who are stuck in a situation where you would think, I can't believe person A is defending person B. I mean, there's defense for Asaram Bapu, and there's a defense for Ajmal Rockstar Kasab. So it's the judicial process. So between Kasab having a fair hearing and believing that Kasab is the biggest evil person in the history of our independent India's history, it is more important to ensure the purity of the criminal justice system than to simply give it a bypass so that we can put people we don't like in jail. So that's the kind of moral fiber that I think would help you clarify a lot of things. Right. So as a corporate lawyer also, for example, let me just take another 30 seconds to give you another example. When I was working with Amarchand Hyderabad, we would have transactions which involved infrastructure companies and capital raising for infrastructure companies. So, I mean, of course, I'm not going to take names, but when we are trying to prepare a due diligence document for an infrastructure company or for a hospital company, for example, the litigation chapter and the outstanding cases chapter, which is, by the way, mandatory under the SEBI ICDR regulations, issue of capital and disclosure requirements. There has to be a chapter on pending litigations, especially those that qualify as possibility of having a substantial impact on the business and the cash operations and cash flow of the company. So now most of the cases against an infrastructure company, in terms of the number, not the amount of indemnity, but the number of the volume wise, the maximum number of cases would be denial of minimum wage. There'd be denial of basic labor law rights, not releasing pension or overtime or this or that. In terms of most hospital-based companies, for example, you'll have a plethora of medical negligence cases that are still pending. I mean, there is no way the company is right in defending this case. But I think at the end of the day, you just have to tell yourself it's not your job to evaluate who is right in this case because you're not the judge. Right? And no matter how much you can self-convince yourself about that superior elevated position for yourself, the truth is we have a judicial process and the judge is going to then be able to decide. So if your job is to prepare a due diligence document, why don't you have the professional commitment to discharge that responsibility to the best of your ability, rather than diverting yourself and trying to imagine what a judge should or should not do? It could be, I think the best example without a law example would be what's happening in recent times, about how you will see hundreds of posts on Facebook where people are saying the fact that there is a GDP contraction of minus 23% should be more important for the national media than whether Riya Chakraborty's WhatsApp messages have been sent to person A or B or C. And hundreds of those people who are repeatedly blaming the national media for focusing more on Riya and Sushant Rajput have not bothered to read the difference between GDP contraction and a drop in GDP growth rate, and what the meaning of GDP would be, and what's the position of the Indian Finance Ministry versus what's the global contraction, or any of those things. They will themselves know more about Riya and Sushant than the GDP numbers, right? But they would still keep on blaming. That's what happens when you don't figure out what your job is and what your duty is and what your morality is, rather try to figure out what other people should be doing. So let the judge do their job. Let the witnesses do their job. You just have to focus on your job, and that's how you keep a conscience clean, I think.
Yeah, that's a very lawyer-like answer that you have given us.
It's a clean conscience answer.
Yeah.
So late President Pranab Mukherjee once said that our educational institutions imparting legal education have to bridge the gap between theoretical concepts and practical application. They have to ignite inquiry and encourage curiosity. The role of encouraging and igniting the curiosity in students are often believed to be that of professors, who play a significant role in shaping future lawyers. In a time where we want to where we want to strike a perfect balance between theoretical and practical approach to study law, how do you think a professor, being on the other side of the thing, can contribute towards instilling the experience while teaching?
So I think to be honest, I think I've already answered this question to a very large extent. In I think one or two questions before this, when we were talking about clinical legal education and the gap between the quality of students and the quality of teachers that we have. Now, having said that, again, I think even during that answer, I told you there are a lot of professors who are more than competent to be able to do this. So I think at the end of the day, a lot of the administrative authorities in the universities have to start giving a certain degree of freedom to the competent faculties to be able to do what they are probably going to be far better at doing, rather than forcing them to teach in a particular curriculum structure and so on. So, I mean, when Professor N.R. Madhav Menon started National Law School, Bangalore, along with Professor Rajappa and the then Bar Council chairman and so on. Of course, the vision was to create a different kind of teaching environment as well. I mean, of course, traditional law schools are already simply teaching you the law, right? I mean, probably, and again, depending on professors, probably with a little more flash and variety as well. But the fundamental difference is the clinical legal approach that we have now, the more practical oriented approach that we have now. So I think faculty members are a lot to be blamed because they don't keep themselves up to date. They don't, again, this is not to say everyone. Some of my teachers, I've been really lucky to have some of my best teachers who taught me a lifetime worth of lessons, as well as law, as well as philosophy. Dr. Maheshwar Singh was my faculty of political science. He's currently a professor at NLU Delhi. Dr. Shantakumar, who's now Vice Chancellor of Gujarat National Law School. And so on. Uday Shankar sir, who teaches at IIT Kharagpur, Rajiv Gandhi School of Intellectual Property now. And so many others who've really inspired me to become a better law student. But that's a handful of people at the end of the day. Right, so Sudhir Krishnaswamy right now is trying to make a lot of changes. And for those of you who may not know the NLS Bangalore, and Sudhir Krishnaswamy sir is now the Vice Chancellor of NLS Bangalore, right? So, just a couple of days back, they announced that they're going to do the NLS Bangalore entrance separately. It's a completely new structure. It's going to be 40 questions, 45 minutes, 80 marks, and there's a negative marking for even unanswered questions, right? Now you'll see a lot of reaction in terms of negativity that's coming out saying, "Arey, sirf 8 दिन का notice कैसे दिए, ये कैसे हुआ, वो कैसे हुआ."
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
the truth is, it's going to be more advantageous for anybody who's been sincerely preparing for the last so many
Right.
months. By the way, the exam was supposed to happen in May. We're already in September. So, if nothing else, you already had 4 extra months to keep on preparing due to the COVID crisis. Now, I understand you did that under a lot of mental pressure and a certain degree of uncertainty and so on. But my God, to be honest, 4 extra months and you're still cribbing about why 8 day notice. Do you really want another 80 days notice for
Right.
this thing? Yeah. So whenever the last issue that I'm trying to point out is, as much as I blame a lot of times the other side of the classrooms and teachers, I think it is equally the job of a
Yeah.
student also, that if you're paying lakhs of rupees for a coaching institute, and you're paying lakhs of rupees to go to even a national law university, the fees is more than 1.5 2 lakhs per year. If that's not motivation for you to put your head down and study, and you still want the professor should come to the classroom and start motivating me, then I mean, get your shit together and prioritize what you're really looking to do in your own life, right? So it's as much the job of the student also. So what if nobody teaches you? What happens if your
Right.
professor tomorrow gets COVID positive and dies? Are you student stop? You don't know corporate law because your professor was COVID positive? That's an unacceptable answer to any law
Right.
professional in the world. So pick up your textbook, open your internet connection, start reading.
Correct,
That's
sir.
true, sir. And like in my classes in law school, I've seen that students kind of still expect the professors to be like school teachers to tell them
Yeah.
everything about the subject and not study
Yeah.
themselves. But you're correct in that point that we gotta open those books and start studying ourselves
Yes.
before the teacher teaches it.
I'll tell you.
On
I'll
the
tell you something
yeah,
in a simpler manner. Uh, See, if there are two people, the definition of what is a good student. When you're in high school, people will tell you, वो एक बार में याद रख लेता है. It's a very
yeah,
cultural thing that you must have heard growing up. कि वो एक बार बताते हैं उसको वो समझ जाता है, genius है. But to be honest, that's not the definition of genius at all. Because by the time you grow up and finish college, no client is ever going to pay you because of your insane ability to understand if explained once. Because they would rather pay the person who is explaining than the person who was so smart that he understood when explained once. Why would I pay somebody who can understand it? Why would I not pay the person who's already explaining? That person is more competent. So develop that. The whole idea of clinical legal education is so that you can develop the skill of researching and finding the right answers, and not कि teacher एक बार बताता है तो मैं समझ जाऊँ. Teacher को पैसे देंगे ना भाई, तुम्हें क्यों देंगे?
Same.
It's it's just
like
deductive
being
logic
argued
from
not
there
right.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's just simpler.
So, just keeping on
Yes.
that point, there's another phrase that we hear quite often in this industry, especially as students, is that like while doing anything, the professor will like think like a lawyer. Give me an answer that a lawyer would do. So like, how can we like in my fourth year now, I can like kind of sort of understand that what they mean when they say think like a
Yes.
lawyer. But for the uninitiated, for the law students who are trying to get in, how could they wrap their heads around this term, think like a lawyer? Like how does it?
I think what that really means is that no matter what a particular sentence and the set of words in a particular sentence and the dictionary meaning is, if you're in fourth year, you already have read the statute of interpretation of statutes and so on. That there's a literal interpretation, there's golden rule, there's
Golden
purposive
rule.
interpretation,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. Uh, but I think that's what thinking like a lawyer really means. If I tell you one particular sentence and I give it to you in writing, uh, normal person reads that sentence, that person probably derives only one meaning out of it.
Yeah.
A good lawyer derives 2 to 3 meanings out of it, and the smartest of lawyers like Jethmalani or Salve would probably sit their client down and say, "आपको कौन सा meaning चाहिए बताइए, वही interpretation हम बता देंगे." It's not. So it could be something as simple as the Parliament may amend this Constitution, which is the first line of Article 368 of our Constitution.
Yes,
But when Nani Palkiwala read that, he didn't read the word "this Constitution" as the Indian Constitution or our Constitution. He went on to demolish the entire war between Parliament and Supreme Court, and came up with the idea of the basic structure doctrine,
Right.
saying this constitution means Constitution of India as on 26 January 1950, because there has to be a time limit, because which constitution can you amend, and therefore the identity of the original constitution. All of that comes from the small Gangotri of the word this.
Yeah.
That's the real beauty. That's the kind of interpretations which makes you fall in love over and over again, and romanticize the profession of law at the end of the day. I mean, even Walt Whitman and Keats really don't have a match in terms of how much I fell in love, how much I felt absolutely shocked that this is the kind of interpretation that you can even imagine, because in my imagination, it was not there. I mean, at best, I'd be able to think of, I don't know, Katrina, Deepika, something, but the word this can be taken that far that the parliamentary history will be restructured. It just looked like a harmless, innocuous word to me. Palkiwala, of course, demolished God knows how many barriers from there on.
Yeah.
So I think that's what they mean, that there are various interpretations possible to a particular sentence, or even to a word as harmless as this.
I think just adding on to that, I have like personally from my experiences discovered when I like am reading a statute or something that the judge is saying, I personally look for what they are not saying. What
Yes.
probably is something that's missing here that could have been there. So I think that has
Yes.
also helped me in some ways.
Yes,
Animesh,
reading. So,
you,
of course, I would agree with that as well.
Yes, sir. Sorry,
so with that, we kind of come to the end of this session. Do you have
Sure.
anything you'd like to say to our viewers?
Those of you who are already in law school, please I think today we've had a lot of philosophical perspectives and discussions. I got to speak my mind on Teachers' Day, but I really don't want to teach anybody how to live or how to think. Having given that disclaimer, let me anyway give you my 2 cents. Compulsive rights of being a teacher in India. So let me first say, please keep on thinking about your own morality and your own conscience and how to keep it clean. Please continue and develop a sense of professional integrity for yourself. So if your teacher's not teaching, that doesn't matter. That's not an excuse. You still have to read for yourself. You still have your batchmates and seniors and juniors who you can keep on interacting with. Feel free to give me a call. My phone number is freely available on Facebook. If you want to have a discussion with or without a couple of glasses of happiness to give us company, we can always have fruitful discussions. Feel free to drop by at my house. Feel free to catch me up on Zoom or on a call and so on. Feel free to those of you who are law aspirants that are not in law school yet. Again, same philosophy, different application. Stop blaming Sudhir Krishnaswamy. Stop blaming the national law schools or the COVID pandemic. Everybody's in the same boat. You just have to learn to swim faster, because it's going to be the same ocean once the boat goes down, right? So don't blame others. You have to figure out that you're just the fastest among the people that you're racing. It's not the board exams. 95 आएगा फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा, 98 आएगा फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा. जितना भी आएगा बाकी लोगों से ज़्यादा लाना है, right? So with that competitive spirit, hit your books up as much as you can. And again, for those of you who are preparing also, feel free to follow us on Legal Sapiens. There's a lot of updates that we keep on publishing. There's free lectures that we have every once in a while. And of course, feel free to reach out to me personally whenever you feel like.
Thank you, sir, so much.
Very happy Teachers Day to all my teachers, and very happy Teachers Day to all my students as well. I think they've also taught me quite a bit, to be honest. And thank you so much to Animesh and Abhipriya as well. You've been really wonderful hosts, and you've also taken some time out on a weekend for me. So it was really nice to have this conversation.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for joining us. And the people viewing us, of course, check out Legal Sapiens. It would help you a lot if you're trying to get into law school, or even in law school. They will help you out. And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. We'll see you in the next.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.